Hello, everyone. We welcome you all to another exciting episode of Bluespring Outloud. I'm particularly excited to be introducing three young and dynamic leaders at three very dynamic firms. We have Brandon Hayes from Believe Land, which is based in Atlanta, and McCabe from Curo Private Wealth in the DC area, and Mark Franczyk from Christopher Street Financial based in New York City. Thank you so much all for joining me for what I think will be an exciting podcast on succession planning. And maybe the first question is addressed to all three of you. You decide who wants to go first. But tell us a little bit about your firm and how you came to be at that firm. Brandon? You want to go
Sure.
first? Yeah.
I came into our firm doing business development. So funny enough, after a few years, I got sick of doing that. And I was fortunate our firm had a lot of leads. And so I, fast forward a few years later, I ended up merging my practice in with one of our founders, which obviously leads into our succession discussion for later on.
All right. Well, happy to be here. I actually started my own firm back in 2010 and was then introduced to Bluespring the end of 2020 and ended up merging my firm with a firm that had been already associated with Bluespring. We merged in 2021. So now we are a joint firm. We always say one firm with two office locations, which represent the legacy practices, but that's where we are today.
And I had actually been a career investment banker for a decade and became a full-time stay-at-home father and had a very fortunate opportunity to meet a very dynamic G1 founder of a firm who was looking for some help to kind of carry the practice to the next level. So as my son entered school, I re-entered the workforce and joined with Christopher Street Financial.
Awesome. Maybe I'll turn the order around. And Mark, your career is one that's interesting because you started off as an investment banker, moved, and now you're running a very successful wealth management advisory firm. Where are you in the transition, and what happened during the time? How did that transition happen?
It's a whirlwind to think of what's actually happened over the last 5 years. So I came in at a time when the founder, Jennifer Hatch, was looking to carry the practice to the next level. The firm she was a bit of a victim of her own success, I'd say, as a sole owner for a firm at that time that had 600 million of AUM. And I think as a lot of G1s realized, it's impossible to wear 5, 6, 20 hats. She had just formed a leadership team and actually gave me a copy when I met with her the first day of Philip Palavev's book, The Ensemble Practice, and said, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. I actually had no experience in financial planning, but I knew how to run businesses. I knew how to wear the CFO hat, the COO hat. And I said, this is the kind of thing I love to do. And we have been working through institutionalizing, professionalizing everything that we've done so that Jen, as a G1, very fantastic advisor, can focus on what's most important for us, the clients, the client experience. And I can take care of everything from the day-to-day operations, strategy, and all those other hats.
Awesome. I want to maybe turn to Anne. Obviously, you are a successful financial advisor running your own business. You don't have the luxury that Mark has, wherein Mark is focused on running the business and he has a team of advisors. So how do you juggle it all? And ultimately, if we can also talk about where you are in your transition to ultimately leading the firm, and what were some of the challenges or milestones that you achieved?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So some days I think I juggle things better than others, like I'm sure everyone can relate to. One of my favorite things is to say struggle with the juggle, because every day every day it is a different kind of struggle. But we are, I would say, through the transition in that I have taken over as CEO of our whole firm. So the G1 on the legacy Maryland side of the business retired. And in fact, his successor also has retired. So we've gone through a couple transitions on the Maryland side of the business. But one of the transitions that I'm very much in is trying to move more into the CEO role and less of the lead advisor role. So I still have a number of clients for whom I am lead advisor. I acquired those clients. They're, used to working with me and used to getting guidance and advice from me. So transitioning some of those relationships where I will still be very involved, but I will no longer be the lead relationship manager, let's say, in that we brought in a service advisor to help us with that. So I am in that transition as we speak, which is, as most people know, a little bit of a challenge getting clients to feel comfortable with someone else, but we are very much embracing the ensemble practice, and we approach our clients from a team perspective, which I think is best for them. And I always tell my clients, I would love to be able to go on vacation and not have to check my email, but I want you to be taken care of, and so they really relate to that and understand that it's in their benefit.
So I want to pull the thread on that, because like a lot of the challenge I see with lead advisors who are also running the firm is, especially, this is more a G1 issue, but since I talk about succession planning, it's interesting, is you've consciously taken the decision, hey, like I need to give hand over client relationships to the advisor so you can focus on bigger and better things. A, there is an emotional attachment that people have to the relationships that they have. And B, the clients probably are going to care, right? Like,
Yeah.
like I've worked with Anne, now I'm being handed off to a service advisor. Can you talk us through some of the challenges in the client communication?
Yeah, absolutely. And Harold Buckner was really helpful for me in the mindset. I remember having a conversation with him early on talking about this transition. And he said to me, as long as your mindset is that you are passing these clients off or handing them off to someone, that's the energy that you're going to bring to the conversation. And that's how clients are going to feel. They're going to feel like they're being passed along, which is probably not going to feel great. On the other hand, if you come to that conversation with excitement and confidence that this is going to be a great transition for your clients, that you are still very much around and very much involved, because let's be frank, a lot of older advisors who are having this conversation, clients are not shocked to hear that they're preparing for their own retirement, but that's different for all of us. Clients are not expecting us to retire. So for me, it was a mindset of this is in their best interest. And even being at this conference, my service advisor has responded to emails quicker, has been very thorough in the response. And I truly believe that my clients are being better served because they don't have to wait for me to get back from this conference to get answers. So I think a lot of it is how you show up in those conversations and how you position it. And if you truly believe this is in their best interest and you're not just saying that, I think that comes through in the communication.
Got it. No, thank you. For those listening to the podcast who aren't familiar with Harold Buckner, that's part of the Bluespring Value Add. He's a strategic relationship director on the Bluespring team. And maybe turning to Brandon, like obviously you've heard like Anne and Mark talk about it. Like you've not only assumed being a leader, but you've also brought along two other advisors, incorporated them, integrated them in your business. And maybe there are some common themes here with Anne and maybe with Mark as well. Can you talk us through your journey?
Sure, yeah. So we were fortunate enough before we were acquired by Bluespring in 2019. We had started the succession planning basically internally. So I was fortunate RG1 had brought me into meetings. I have some feedback on what we can improve on that process. We'll talk about later. So we had a head start before we were acquired, which was nice. So, I knew a lot of the clients, but obviously, there was a transition of a few years for me to take over those relationships. In addition to that, I think a lot of folks overlook the leadership in the practice and what happens when the G1 steps out and when they're not in those rooms, they're not doing leadership development and those kind of things. And so oftentimes we're focused on the client side of it, but the internal piece of what happens when that person's longer there is the trust factor with the team and how do you, differentiate yourself from that individual. So we were very fortunate. We had a head start in the transition. I think things went very well. Yes, you have some attrition, but some of those people I was happy to see go, to be honest. And you can kind of shape how you want the practice to look, right? You kind of have a fresh take on their client base and who you want to work with. As you mentioned, Pradeep, we did, after a few years after the G1 and I sold, we did acquire, or I guess merge two other large practices internally. And they had very slim staff. So they had a skeleton crew, I call it, and very successful individuals. But I was really excited to just integrate them into our team because I knew how much bandwidth they would, create basically by just having staff support that they didn't have. And so for me, It's been 2 or 3 years since I've watched that happen and transition. And so that's been great to watch their practices grow with just having more staff. Also too, having other leaders and having 2 new business partners provided me the chance to have a fresh look at things and not try to be, hey, I'm the boss here, having people help with staff leadership meetings and obviously different piece of advice and different guidance. And so we are mostly through all of that transition. We are always told, just make sure you're making progress. Don't worry about trying to do it at once. I think folks have to realize that every transition is different, right? So, which mine was different from the G1 and different from, merging into other practices. And so have a plan, but go at your own pace and know that there's going to be some bumps along the way. You have personalities involved as well. And so that's part of it. I understand in egos. And so if you can kind of put the egos aside and do what's best for the clients and the teammates, I think, in the end, we are very, very happy with the outcome.
So it's interesting that all three of you have had different journeys here. So maybe this is a question. I'll start with Mark, but I want the two of you to chime in, right? Like, so Mark, you're kind of in the situation wherein the G1 is still involved in the business. Yeah. For you, you had a nice transition, and the G1 was able to say, fine, you're in charge, Brandon. And for you like forged your own way into the leadership, right? And like the question for you, Mark, is like, what are some of the challenges of working with a G1, and how can you as a G2 avoid them, and what can the G1 be doing differently? Like this is not specific to you guys, but like, what are some best practices in that? And I would love for you, the two of you, to chime in with your experiences.
It's a very interesting dynamic. I think one of the biggest keys to our success in navigating this, first off, was we just need to be really clear about the roles and responsibilities among ourselves and among the team. And we've adopted EOS, so accountability, and how that is mapped out was core to what we were doing. So that helped a lot. Yeah. But one of the critical things is just really continuing to have very open communication. And it sounds a little kumbaya, but having to really appreciate the fact of this isn't just about the business and the rest, but having to understand what this represents in terms of G1 transitioning kind of to a longer term succession. And I do feel very fortunate in that I have Jen with me for, as the foreseeable in terms of being there for the clients so that we can leverage one another's skill sets. But just making sure that we are always in tune with one another in terms of what that means. And it's been very helpful for me, even just thinking, well ahead of what my succession will be, but just knowing I need to map this out for myself as well. I need to be thinking about what it means to hand off and transition responsibilities and making sure that I'm kind of ready for that stage with my team as well.
Yeah, so I'll just add, I think, our G1 was not as forthright in some of the early meetings of what was happening. So that was part of our battle of the clients kind of knew, but you were skirting around the issue or the question like, hey, this new person is doing a lot more in the meetings, and is he my next person? So once it was kind of out there and people figured it out, we did start changing our messaging in the meetings because we realized being more forthright was better. Hey, I'm bringing in Brandon. He's going to lead the practice. He's going to be, basically the new leader in the practice. He'll be your day to day. And so I think once we learned that piece, it helped. Also, too, clients are smart. And they knew what was happening before we even had told them. So some folks, surprisingly to us, were actually excited because, to Ann's point about having other people giving you more service, they knew that I had a different vision and just what he had brought to the table. He had built a phenomenal practice, very successful, but I think they wanted somebody else, maybe a little more hand-holding, and have, he was always very busy, obviously, as a lot of owners are. And so I think somebody else that had a little bit more of a personal care and touch, I think that they were excited to hear. So have we had any, issues since he's been fully out of the picture? We really haven't. I think if anything, our team has been embraced by, proving themselves of just the level of service that they have. And maybe they were overshadowed a little bit by the previous owner, for whatever reason, they just weren't appreciated as much in recognition and those kind of things. And so, yes, we've come a long way with having, departments and career tracks that he didn't have before, which helps. But those folks are now interacting with clients directly, maybe before they weren't. So that's kind of a backstory of our transition. And since he's fully out, I think a lot of it we have to remember is it's in your own head. And so, to Ann's point about like, I don't know with the messaging and the client, and if you position it right and say, you want better service and I'm doing this for the right reasons and it's genuine, it's all going to be okay. But for us, we start, what if, and with clients this, and a lot of times they just want to know that we're going to take care of them. It's that simple. So don't overcomplicate the messaging with clients, internally with your team and externally with clients.
Actually, the internal team thing is actually, I think, very key. And this is actually goes to what Ann was saying about when you have to present the new team for an advisors, you have to do it with confidence to show that you're excited about this. And something I greatly appreciate that Jennifer did for me was to give me a lot of visibility with the team well ahead of when we actually did the transition, and it gave me the platform, and actually, I think, helped instill in the team confidence that she knew that I was going to be able to fill this role. And I greatly appreciate that. And I think it was part of what made continues to make our transition successful.
So my challenges were very different from Brandon and Mark in that by the time I took over, the original G1 from the older legacy business was no longer around. So I didn't have to battle anyone. It was just me kind of showing
just yourself, right? Which
just
can be hard
myself.
enough. Yeah.
Lots of battles with myself.
Yeah.
But my biggest challenge was I had a 10-year-old firm that I merged into a 40-year-old firm. So those of us who have been in the industry for a while know just in and of itself what that probably means. My 10-year-old firm, we were financial planning centric. We were advisory for wealth management. The 40-year-old firm was not financial planning driven, was not advisory, lots of advisory business, but also a lot of other sorts of financial products, depending upon the decade that we were talking about over the previous 40 years. And so my biggest challenge was, how do we take this, modern, younger firm and merge it into this older, not so modern firm? And what do we want to take? What are the best things from each sides of the businesses and each of our legacy businesses that we want to take into the future? What is our service offering going to look like? What is our pricing going to look like? What is our client service model going to look like? And so it was almost like recreating a business, if you think about it that way, although we had obviously lots of existing clients and assets. So that has been and continues to be, frankly, it's not something that you can turn overnight. It's we always say you can't, the Titanic didn't turn very quickly, obviously. So with a large firm the way it is now, it is still very much a project that is ongoing. But that was hands down my biggest challenge, is how do we bring these two very different businesses together, and what does it look like moving forward?
That's actually it's a thought-provoking answer. I'll get back to that later because I want to pull the thread on that. But maybe another question for Mark and Brandon, maybe not as relevant for you. What would you wish the G1s would have done differently, right? Like, how could this process have been even better? Are there any missteps, any learnings as people hearing this podcast, maybe G1s or G2s, should be thinking about more proactively?
Yeah, I would say, I already mentioned this, really it's just the internal messaging to the team of what is going to happen transition-wise. I was fortunate that I was also similar to Mark. I was given the opportunity to lead meetings and those kind of things beforehand, but there wasn't a clear message of when I was going to be taking over the reins. I think with clients as well, these people are friends of the owners. And so it's already a touchy topic. And so it's better to say, look, we've been successful. And because of this, I'm going to move on to something else in my life that I'm passionate about. It's politics or in the community, whatever you want to do. But you are going to be very well served with Brandon and the team, and he's going to be on more meetings coming forward. And so I think the messaging, as I mentioned before, just being direct with clients. And also too, I think that the clients that aren't okay with it for some reason, at least early on whether they're going to stay or go, and you have a chance to address the concerns. If not, it's like this slow transition of clients, gradually leaving, which you don't want. So I think being more direct in those meetings and, introducing the person as, hey, this is our next leader in the practice, is very, very important. And roles and responsibilities, as Mark mentioned, is important as well. Of what's going to happen internally. What am I going to take over that the G1, didn't or did previously? So those are just a couple of tips that I would recommend.
Yeah, I think the roles and responsibilities thing is key. And when I look back about how we've transitioned, how we've gone through things, what would we have done different or asked? It's not what I would have had Jennifer do differently, but it's actually myself. Yeah. I think a lot of it, I was, gung-ho, wanted to plow through, let's completely new strategies and agendas and all of this. And actually wish I had taken a pause and focused a little bit on the human element of it. I think it would have been better for just the overall navigating and appreciating the fact of, I have somebody here who's done everything soup to nuts for so long, and appreciated the fact of, even when we've defined clear roles and responsibilities, it's instinct. It's like, it's innate. It's in the blood. It's like hard to move away from that. And here I am wanting to plow ahead. And actually, I wish I had stopped a little bit more often to check in and be like, how are you? Where are you in this process for yourself? And I think that would have, eased what was, I won't say tension, but just a lot of kind of unnecessary angst around what we were doing, and reinforced the message of, and actually this was a book that Anne had recommended to me, which was kind of transformative in my thinking and how we position with the firm, but what got you here won't get you there. And actually, from that concept, taking the time to actually acknowledge with Jennifer is like, you got us here. You have done so much and built this foundation. So when I'm plowing ahead, it's not me saying that everything was wrong. And we spoke to that part, but I didn't take enough time to acknowledge, like, you have done so much to get us here, and being really openly appreciative of that.
It's not your fault. You were an investment banker.
Yeah. So I had some deep programming too to do as well. So
Don't be too hard on
it's all about growth, right? It's all about growth.
Some investment bankers have a human element.
I love it. Yeah.
And I wanted to, you said something very thought-provoking. You merged a 10-year-old firm with a 40-year-old firm. And like Mark, you spoke about the human element. Like we spoke about clients, completely get that, right? Like messaging needs to be clear. What about the internal team that have historically worked with a G1? In your case, you didn't even have a G1. You're just taking over a new business. But the two of you, people are used to Gen, people are used to your G1. Like, how did you go about establishing, authority sounds too strong a word, but how do you go about establishing, hey, like, I'm the leader, I'm going to lead you, preserving the culture, getting people to trust you? Can you talk about your journeys, right? Yeah.
So, I don't think it was much different than what we were doing, honestly. Yeah. I think if anything, as Mark mentioned, just like getting on their level, to the human level, to say, this is what's going on. You're important to our team, because every person is important in an ensemble practice. Let's be honest, that from the person who's scheduling meetings to sending checks to doing paperwork. So I think being genuine with those individuals and sharing that with them, which maybe they weren't getting from the G1, or if they were, it was very little. And so I think they felt a little bit of like relief and excitement, knowing that somebody else cared about them, if that makes sense. Yeah. And some of these folks, I trusted to lead departments of ours, that we started mapping out a career track that we didn't have previously. So I think we had started building trust even previously, before I took over the leadership. We do check-in meetings with folks, one-on-ones, and it's both personal and professional. And so I think having that foundation of caring about them as people helped me be able to relate to them and be able to speak to them honestly. We are a completely open book of a firm. I don't want to hide anything. And so I think having that transparency and honesty helped us as well, where they knew I cared about them. And I think that's really what it comes down to. So I think that was, and I think also too, just like I mentioned with the clients, they kind of knew what was happening, because you can kind of see when the G1s, I don't want to say checked out, but they're not as excited when they come into meetings. They're not giving the same amount of attention to the employees. So I think when the news is announced officially, and they know that I'll be taking over his position or his clients and leadership, there's probably a little relief, because there's no gray area or waiting for, what's behind door number 3, like, oh gosh. So I think there's, was relief internally as well as externally.
Yeah. So for us, it wasn't as much maintaining the culture as it was establishing a culture.
Yep.
When we merged, we had 5 people, and now we have 9. So we've about doubled the team. And for us, it was really figuring out what are the positions and who are those people and what are the values and experience that we were looking for to fill those, seats on the bus, if you will. But I'm a huge believer in one-on-ones. I think that has made a massive difference. So I have one-on-ones with currently basically all of my team members every month. I'm not going to be able to sustain that forever.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to check in with people, to give people a voice. And when we are going to hire, one of the things we always talk about that is a huge differentiator of our firm is that we feel and we act like a small business, and we want everybody's voice to be heard. And if we have a new creative idea, we want to be able to experiment with it and pivot quickly like a small business. But we have the backing and the foundation and the benefits of Bluespring and of a large corporate partner. And so kind of going to market with that message, I think has made a big difference to attract really, really great talent who believes in what we're doing, keeping that communication open and letting people know that we really care about them. And we want to hear, what do they think we should be doing differently? How can we improve? I think they feel invested in the success of the firm.
For me, the big thing I was always focusing on is just showing up.
Yeah.
And it was all about, I'm going to say what I'm going to do and I'm going to do it. And a big thing that we encountered was, bringing in a lot of ideas for change and big initiatives, and people, the change management, oh God, it's scary. And also I think I was a perspective of, we've tried some of these big things before and they never got off the ground. And here we are trying the third time. It's like, it's going to happen. We're going to make it happen this time. And working through some major projects with the team and actually them seeing like, wow, we're transforming. It's not nearly as scary, as painful as I thought it was going to be. And here we are, having moved so much further than I thought. So I think that being able to kind of carry a lot of things through to success kind of created, I'm hoping, created that inspiration, like, hey, there's a lot that we can do here together as a team.
I guess we're about nearing the end of the podcast. If there are any parting thoughts, pieces of advice you'd like to give to other G2s or G1s in terms of, hey, like, this is how a good succession plan should work. Any parting thoughts?
I think as kind of a G1 and now a G2, I'm in a little bit of a unique situation. I think as a G1, the message that I would send is it's really important to check in on our own mindset, and sometimes if you're in a meeting with your G2s, to just pardon, but shut up and let the G2, let the G2 actually take a leading role in the meeting, because it is scary from a control perspective to kind of give up your baby that you've worked so hard to build. So I think just kind of checking in on our own mindset and making sure that we are setting our G2s, et cetera, up for success is really key.
Yeah, I think just having a plan, right, and sharing it. The earlier you can share it with your team, and obviously when you get on a meeting, almost do a role play. You have your biggest top 10 clients. What is the G1 saying, and how is it going to go? And to Anne's point, can I speak up, or am I going to sit there in the meeting and just take notes? So it has to be a transition of, this person's going to be the next leader. He's going to be the next relationship person for you. I think that's obviously very, very important. There's some things obviously along the way you may not know they're going to come up, but I think there's also from the G2 perspective is, do your homework. If you're on a meeting with somebody, you should know every single thing about that individual. Your follow-up recap meeting notes should be very, very prompt and thorough, and then just be genuine on the meeting. Right? It'll take some time. It'll probably take a few years to get that rapport built up and relationship. But if you start off to a good start, obviously you'll be better off. So. Yeah.
I say, just in addition to having the plan, have the plan as early as possible. Yeah. And it's impossible to be too early in the process. You don't have to be 75, 70, 50. The earlier you're having the conversation, the smoother it's going to be. And if you are, say, 50 and you start to have the conversation, what it means is that you are working and developing your team. You're actually, I think, creating a better company because you're putting thought into, well, what's that person who's maybe just started? Where are they going to move? So I think it benefits the company well beyond your actual monetization or something like that.
Thank you all. This was really, really invigorating. There are like a few key takeaways that I have, like all those who are listening to the podcast, having a very clear plan, over communicating with a clear message both to your clients and your staff, defining roles and responsibilities and empowering people to carry out those roles and responsibilities. And lastly, but not least, don't forget the human element as you think through your succession plan. Thank you all for joining for another podcast of Bluespring Outloud.